Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is Wendy Fortino on WOLFpak Live, and we have such a special treat for you today. We have an awesome episode. We have our very special guest today, Mel Chancey. And Mel comes to us. He is, a lot of people know his story, but we're going to share it, and he's going to share some other inside information that maybe you haven't heard. But he is a former Hells Angels president. He has done his time. He said the whole story is up for grabs. He's going to talk about all of it. He is an incredible show promoter. He's a leader in our industry. He's connected and he knows so many people, which tells me that he's extremely well respected and everybody just loves Mel. So we're so happy to have you here, Mel, and welcome aboard.
Wendy, thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this one. You know, as me and you were talking the other day, it's the first time I'm doing really an industry podcast, right? Yeah. For your many years in the industry, as everybody knows you, and kind of the first time. So I'm excited to be here with you and telling the story here.
Yeah, I know you like to focus right now in your life on the positive. You hold a light around you, and I know that you protect your energy a lot right now, and you're really focused on being on a platform where, your light is shown in exactly the way that you want it to. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to honor you, and we're going to share your light exactly as you wish. So
I'm excited. Let's roll.
So let's get into it now.
Yeah. We're ready to roll.
I actually want to just dive right into, straight for the nucleus of this story. And I want to know, the most curious thing for me is, how in the world did you get into the Hells Angels in the first place? We're going to start there.
Okay. So as I always say, I was like the least likely boy, as I'll say at the time, young man, to go and do that. I came from a very strict Catholic Italian home, very strict. I was an altar boy. When I say that you could throw a baseball from my house to the church, literally was right out my gate, right, maybe 50 feet to the right. So grew up in the church, catechism, CCD, and everything like that. So I knew the Lord from when I was a young man, and then going into high school, I was a baseball player. I was a catcher, on all the little league teams. My dad was my coach. My mother ran the concession stand and ran the bank. So like the Chancey family in the neighborhood was like held, they were up there, right? My two sisters went to Catholic school, right? So, you could see what I did. But, I always loved bodybuilding. I was a big fan when I was watching, the cartoons when I was a kid. And I always said, that's what I want to look like when I grow up. I want that body. I love He-Man and stuff. And when I went to high school, my first year, you're 15 years old. A few months into high school, I ended up getting into a fight with some guys that they bust in from another town. Their school got shut down, so they bust them in. And these guys were kind of messing with the girls we went to school with. They were there, right? So we got into a fight. Me and another one of my friends got into a fight with these guys, and we got suspended from school. And when my mom came to pick me up, she went into the office with the principal, and then they called me in, and my mom was crying. My old Italian, my mom Italian lady was crying and stuff. And I heard the principal kind of, getting in her, if parents knew how to raise their children and blah, blah, blah. I kind of just seen red and jumped over the counter and socked him in the face.
I heard you got so mad you broke his nose.
Yeah, I hit him in the face. My poor parents had to pay the medical bills because I wasn't 16. And so the suspension went to an expulsion, right?
Oh, man. You're like, I did this for you.
I know, right? So I had told my mom, I'm like, well, you might as well sign me out because I'm not 16. And you're not going to drive me 30 minutes to another district because I'm going to run out the back door. I'm not going, right?
Wow.
So she did. She signed me out. And,
so really fast, let me ask you this. Why were you so defiant? Like, what was in you that caused you to feel, because you grew up in, in a Catholic neighborhood, you were really, sounds like you were, in a religious household, and it sounds like a great family, close-knit family. Like, what caused you to be so?
I think probably seeing my mom cry, right? Seeing her cry and him being a little bit rude in the room with her and stuff. I kind of brought that out of me because, I wasn't, like you said, I wasn't raised like that,
So you have like a very protective nature. Like, you like to protect people that you care about. Okay. I'm seeing a trend with you. Got it.
Yeah, very much so. So then my mom signed me out, of course, and after about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of lounging in the family pool, because I thought I was on vacation, she came and brought some construction boots home. I go, "What are them for?" And she goes, "Oh, you're going to work." My uncle had a concrete company at the time. So we're going to go work with your Uncle Joe, who poured concrete, right? So
yeah.
I went to work with my Uncle Joe, but at the time there was a gym that was right in back of my house. Literally, I said the church was one way and the gym was, it took me 4 minutes to walk to this gym. It was called Jay's Body Shop. And it was an old big barn, a barn. And you paid $5 a month and you got the key to go in there. So I was, pouring concrete and bodybuilding. I loved, I was flipping the magazines back then when, and the magazines. And I, loved Lee Haney and Lee Labrada and, the old greats like that. And it was in that gym that I met these two guys. And, they were 10 and 12 years older than me. And they come in and train and they wore jeans and no shirts, in the summertime, training in this hot barn. And they kind of took me under their wing and they're like, "Hey kid, don't do that like that. Do it like this." And they just started showing me how to lift weights the right way. And I really was mesmerized by them. They were all tatted up and stuff. They were jacked up. I didn't know why they didn't train legs at the time. Until later, I just
why?
Well, a lot of biker guys never really train legs.
Oh, because they need the.
They're not bodybuilders, so they're like, legs. You know what? We wear jeans.
They get in the way of riding motorcycles.
Yeah, so I didn't know because I didn't see them on their motorcycles. I didn't know who they were. And then about maybe 6, 8, 9 months later, here they came riding into the gym one day, and they had their jackets on, and they were part of this motorcycle club called the Hell's Henchmen, which we were before we switched over to Hell's Angels.
Oh,
the club was called Hell's Henchmen, and I seen that, and I was like, "Wow, you guys, these guys are in this motorcycle club." I heard of these Hell's Henchmen and the Outlaws and all the clubs in Chicago. So they brought now I'm like 17 years old, and they said, "Why don't you come down to a party one day at the clubhouse?" And I said, "Okay." So I went down for a party. I bought a motorcycle. I had a bike. I grew up with dirt bikes, so I loved motorcycles.
Right.
Well, I bought my first Harley when I was 17 because now I was pouring concrete, and at the time I was making $11, $12, $13 an hour back then in the 80s. That was good money, right, Kat?
Right.
I bought my first Z28 IROC and I bought my first Harley.
Right.
So I went down on my bike. I went to the clubhouse. I met a bunch of guys, in the club, and it was an open party to the public and everything like that. Met the president and everybody like that, and just started hanging around him a little bit. Well, when one of the guys, Al, that he passed away, it's his tombstone on my arm. He got killed. He said to me, he goes, "Hey, they want to know if you want to start prospecting." And I said, "Yeah." I go, "I'd love to." And he goes, "Okay, they think you're 21.
Right.
You be 21 to get in the club." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "When they call you in that room, remember you're 21. So I got in that room, seen all these big, scary dudes at the time in front of me. And when they asked me how old I was, I froze up. And I go, "I'm 18, but I'm going to be 19. They're like, "What?" And they looked at Al, and I go, "He didn't know." I go, "He sees me in the bars. I already had facial hair. I was already training. So I already had a build going on. And I took the heat off him. I go, "He didn't know." I said, he thinks I'm 21 because he sees me in the bars. He never asked me my age. So the president says, "Well, you can't be in the club until you're 21. He said, "But you could be our friend and be around." I said, "Okay, cool." Kept working, kept pouring concrete.
I have a quick question for you really fast. So the rival gang was the Outlaws, but you had your heart set on the Angels Henchmen.
The Henchmen at the time, then we switched.
Okay. I'm going to ask you another question about that later, but keep going.
Yeah, because I met them two guys, and then they became my
got it.
Mesmerized by them. So then, I was working, a hard worker. I loved pouring concrete. It was good money, and it was physical work for me at a young age. And I was in the summer getting tan and training at nighttime and stuff. So then I went down for a party, and I was mid-19s and stuff. And the same president said to me, he goes, "How old are you now?" And I said, I'm 19 and some change. I was only a year ago. And he goes, man, you look rough. You're going to age rough. He goes, you look like you're 30, right?
He's like, you'll pass. Don't worry. Come on.
Right. He goes, you want to come in the club? And I said, I do. His name was Jerry. I said, I do. And he said, okay, come on, start prospecting and stuff. So that's how I ended up, doing that. I was prospecting for the club, out all night. I get home about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, enough time to make a lunch for my work day and go to work all day in the hot sun, pouring concrete, which is very taxing. And the minute I got off of work, I went right to the gym. That was like my main thing. I trained, went home, ate a meal and laid down for a little bit because I knew the phone was going to ring at 10:30, the witching hour for all of us to, go out and be out. And that's what I did.
And you were passionate about it.
I was passionate about
it. It was something you actually probably looked forward to. It was like this exciting new thing in your life.
Yeah, it was.
That's crazy.
I wanted to earn that membership in the club. All the guys took me under their wing because I was the youngest one.
Yeah, you were. So, okay, then how did you become the president? You were so passionate. You worked your way up the ranks. And they have to vote. As far as I know, they have to vote you in. So this is like a very respected role because it means that your brotherhood, your brothers in that gang, I guess.
Yeah,
they really respected you.
Yeah, we say in the club. So yeah, they did. So I got in as a Hell's Henchman. And then, I became our sergeant of arms first, which is like kind of the enforcer for the, for the club. And then we decided, we knew some Hell's Angels, and we decided that we were going to, disband the Hell's Henchmen and become Hell's Angels. We really did a prospecting.
Wow. So you were a big part of that name change.
I was there I was the original one, the original guy, one of the original members that came from the Hell's Henchmen, 13 of us to be exact, that we gave a lot of guys that were in the Hell's Henchmen were a lot older and they've been there for 30, 40 years. And they didn't want to make that change because we knew what was coming. Yeah. Because the Outlaws and the Hell's Angels have been battling since 1969. That was the year I was born. So, and there was never no Hell's Angels in the Midwest. So,
now, from what I heard, from what I know, the Outlaws outnumbered you guys by quite a bit. They had like 100 to your like 25 guys. Oh, easy. And from what I hear, to offset that, you decided to train an army of tough, strong fighting machines. Yeah. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I decided to train them, but the 13 members that we were left with, because we gave everybody an option from the Hell's Henchmen. If it's not for you guys been around a long time. If this ain't for you, it's time to hang it up. You can't remain Hell's Henchmen because we're laying that club down and we're switching over to Hell's Angels. So out of them 13 guys, we were the guys that knew what was coming. We knew that the Outlaws were never going to sit quiet for this because now we just brought their mortal enemies back in the day right into the Midwest where they never were, right? We gave them 3 chapters, our Chicago chapter, Rockford, Illinois, and South Bend, Indiana. So we gave them 3 chapters, like I said, between them, 20-something guys, 25 guys, let's say. So we knew, our Chicago guys, me being the young one, we knew that we were going to have to get busy when it was a confrontation with these guys. And, there was a bunch more young guys. I was the youngest, then there was a guy 5-6 years older than me and all in that area. And then guys that, were much older, 15, 20, 25 years older. And a lot of us trained. I told you, I loved the bodybuilding, so I was trained. And there was no MMA back in that day, in the early 90s. So we were all hitting heavy bags and making sure that we were able to. And as Hell's Henchmen, we were fighting all the time with the other different motorcycle clubs, but just this kind of fighting. It was just fist fights. And if we seen each other in a bar and somebody looked at somebody the wrong way, it was that. It was nothing what was to come, with the craziness, it was still the fist fights. I call them the playground fights because, you're fighting as a kid in school, the playground, yeah. And then the president that was the president from the Hell's Henchmen, who was, probably the president for 18, 20 years at the time. One day I came into a meeting and they told me, he said, hey, we took a vote. And, you're not the sergeant of arms anymore. And I said, well, how could you take a vote without me being here? I was a little late for the meeting. I said, how could you do that? It's supposed to be one man, one vote. How could you do that? I was kind of in my feelings. And he goes, because we want you to be the president. I was like, wow. Okay. I was traveling all around the country, getting to meet different Hells Angels in all the different states, from New York to California to everywhere I was going. And I was that young, eager young man now at the time. And so everybody was, took a liking to me and stuff. And there it went from there. I became that guy that was found ourselves in the middle of a crazy war. And I was,
right. We're going to talk about that. But let's say somebody's a total idiot. Okay. And doesn't totally understand the way that the clubs operate. I could speculate, but I would assume that if you're having a war with another club, it's because the territory that you both want, you're battling for, right? You're maybe, I guess a better way of putting it is maybe you're battling for a territory. Maybe that's really lucrative, I'm assuming. And so is that what it is that you and the Outlaws would battle over, or were there other things?
Well, it's kind of like the territory.
And I'm sorry if that's a stupid question. I genuinely want to know.
Not at all. That's the question to ask. I mean, it was a territorial thing, and the egos, right? The Outlaws had the Midwest. The Hells Angels had the West Coast. The East Coast was the Angels, and there was some Outlaws on the East Coast in Buffalo and Ohio and stuff like that. South, Kentucky, there was Angels and Outlaws together. The Midwest was strictly the Outlaws, and California was strictly the Angels. Mm-hmm. That would have been like them starting up a chapter of the Outlaws and putting them right in the center of California back in the day. Nobody would have went for that on the Angel team, right? So same what we knew what we were doing. We actually, the Outlaws heard when we were in talks with the Angels. They got wind of it, of course. They called us up on the phone. They said, we want a meeting with you guys. We knew them as Hell's Henchmen because we weren't fighting with them. We never, once in a while, if a push came to shove, but there was no war, as they call it. So we went and sat down with them. I think there was 5 of them, 5 of us. Mm-hmm. And when they asked us, hey, we heard a rumor. Is the rumor true? And we said, the rumor's true. And one of their guys that now doing a life in prison, but who was a serious guy, he looked at us and he stood up from the table and he goes, well, there's nothing else for us to talk about. He goes, we'll see you when we see you. And I was like, ooh.
Oh, uh-oh.
At 23 years old, I was like, 24 years old. I was like, who? So when we were all going back to our clubhouse together and stuff, I said, all right, guys, we better tie our shoes up because these dudes just showed us their hand. They walked out of that meeting, when we met them in a restaurant. So it was all.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. And I said, everybody better be safe. It's on. They're going to, we came to their hub. The Outlaws started in Chicago and, in the I think late 30s. Mm-hmm. So that was not only, that was their hub of all. That's where they started, So, and then of course, here it started, and it started, they jumped a few of our guys in a bar and then we returned the favor, jumped a few of their guys in a bar. And the next thing you know, a shooting happened and then a shooting happened their way. And next thing you know, where they're setting off the third largest bomb that ever was set off to this date.
And that's what I heard. They apparently set up a bomb, the third largest to be detonated in the United States of all time, which is insane. And how did you even know that happened? And how are you still here? How are you still alive?
So it was the middle of a
loaded question, but
it was the middle of a week. It was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I think it was like 1994. And I was home at my home, and I got some phone calls, and my phone was just started ringing from just friends, and they're like, "Hey, bro, you better turn on the news. I think your clubhouse is on the news." And I turned and I go, which news? And they go, anyone. They're all on. And I go, wow, okay. Yeah. So I turned on whatever Channel 7 News and I see our, Grand Avenue and stuff. And I'm like, I see that there's no lights and I see this building on fire and all this kind of chaos and stuff, So then the members are calling me up and I go, man, something happened to our clubhouse. So we all gathered up. There was a gas station about 5-6 blocks down the street. And we all gathered up at the gas station. They had it all blocked off. You couldn't get there. And this Grand Avenue in the city of Chicago was a very, very busy street, main street that runs through. And they did it like 5 o'clock, 5:30. in the evening. It was wintertime, so that, it was dark already. The sun was down. And I'm like, wow, we knew nobody was at the clubhouse. So we knew nobody was inside there. We knew that. And so when we were all standing there, they had the ATF down there, all the agencies were down there, and they seen me in the gas station and came walking up to me. And, my nickname was Road. And they're like, hey, Road, we want to talk to you. What happened here? And I go, I don't know. I seen it from TV. Like, I don't know what happened. Right. And they go, who do you think did it? I said, I don't know that either. I don't pick somebody. I don't know. Right. So they let me walk down the sidewalk towards the clubhouse. We wanted to see what was going on. And they put 100 pounds of C4 in the back of this trunk of a car. And one of their members, who must have had gonads like that, drove that car onto the sidewalk in front of our door and pinned it so nobody could get out, hoping somebody was in there. And when that bomb blew, it went down first, and it blew like a 5, 6, 7 foot deep hole into that concrete. And then the explosion comes up, right? The blast is what gets you, right? And knocked the steel door all the way through the back. We had a big steel door that was so heavy when it was on a roller. It was on like a ball roller on the bottom because it was a big steel door. Blew that right out the back of the clubhouse. And by the grace of God, nobody got hurt. And we had some cameras across the street. There was an auto parts store, and we had some cameras across the street that nobody knew about. And you seen on the camera, a commuter bus just went by, literally just got out of the way, maybe, 60 seconds, 70 seconds. And the last thing you see is a Chicago cop car, and he's going by super slow. And he looks at the car, because we talked to the cop, and he was thinking about, his partner goes, hey, we got to go write that car a ticket. They're on the sidewalk. And he looks and he goes, oh, that's the Angels. They're probably moving something in. Thank God that they did not get out of that car and go towards that car, because they would have been dead.
They would have been dead. Wow.
And
you're thinking about them. That's crazy. Because you guys just have beef with each other. You don't want you don't want people to get hurt.
No, we never wanted the innocent to get hurt in anything that we were doing. We never knew, we were never expecting this. By that time they had killed a Hell's Angel already earlier in '94. They went into his motorcycle shop in Rockford, and he had a bike shop, so he was there. He was just opened it up, and they went in there. His name was Monty, and they killed Monty in the bike shop. And then their president, who was the equivalent of me, their president got shot off his motorcycle. He lived. So the shootings were already going on. It already escalated from the fights to the shootings. But none of us had any idea that we were ever going to be talking about bombs. I
would imagine that was probably that struck you with so much fear. Did you decide after that you're just done with this?
Well, no, because now in that world, you just can't do that. You can't go.
You're connected with your brotherhood.
Yes. And we decided to do this together as a team. And even if we said wow, this is getting a little too out of control, we couldn't call time out with the Outlaws at the time, because they weren't wanting to hear it. They told us. So
what was your plan after that?
To try to keep everybody in the crew safe as we could, but you have to retaliate in that world. In that 1%er world, that's what's gonna go. If you just sit back and let them keep doing, it's a one-sided thing, that's not going to go. And then all the other clubs are going to see that, and then everybody's going to be doing this.
Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is they've already used their bomb. The bad news is they know how to create one.
Yeah, because then after that happened, right, even though that it put everybody on blast, so it's no pun intended, on blast, the ATF was in town because they took over our clubhouse for 2 weeks. We couldn't go down it. We couldn't use it. And they brought people in from Washington, ATF, the FBI was in there. Everybody was in there just, dissecting this building as much as they could. And, the things were hot in the city, right? I mean, no motorcycle clubs were going out and being in public. Everybody was kind of laying low. But like I said, in that world, you better return the favor, right? So then we put a bomb on their clubhouse. and we blew not 100 pounds of C4, of course, but we blew the front of their door right out the side of their building.
Yours was the 50th largest detonator in the United States.
Yeah. So we ended up doing that.
I'm kidding. I'm just making that up.
Yeah. We ended up doing that to theirs. And, and then it kept going. And then they put a bomb under. Now they got, they had a guy that obviously were guys that knew what they were doing. And we were checking our vehicles. And now they put a bomb under one of our guys' cars. But we all had remote starts because after the bomb happened on Grand Avenue, we always thought about the cars. So I had a Corvette. Now I kind of graduated from the IROC.
That's smart.
Yeah. So I now had a Corvette because I wasn't pouring concrete. I only poured concrete for about a year after I made it into the club. Then I learned how to make money in the illegal trade, right? So then I was like, okay, why am I going to go to work? I need to be here focused on this. So now I had a vet. So we had electric starts on our cars, starting them up. Well, the guy from Rockford, the angel from Rockford, he had a pickup truck. He started it up with the remote start. Everything was good. He got in it. When he put it in reverse, they had put the like a wire, a string on the yoke. So that detonated the bomb. So it blew up underneath him with him in it.
Oh.
He died twice on the way to the hospital. They revived him. He's living to this day.
No way.
Yeah, he lived through it. Blew the back.
We have to get him. Can I bring him back on here with you?
I don't talk to them guys. He's still.
Oh, you don't talk to him? Oh, he's still in there. Okay. Wow.
But he lived through that craziness. It blew up. Legs were pumping blood and everything like that. Our Chicago guys were going up to the hospital in Rockford, staying 24-hour shifts to make sure.
I can't believe he survived that.
He survived that. And then they put a bomb under another Hell's Angel in Rockford's car. He found it. He's seen it.
Thank God.
He couldn't do nothing about it. So he called up the local police and said, hey, I found this thing under my truck. I don't know what it is, but we know the bombings are going. So they brought the ATF out. The ATF couldn't take it off. So they built a big shield around the car and they hit it with a water cannon. And that blew the bomb up in his truck and everything. They shielded it from everybody. They made a compound around it. So all this is like scaring you shitless. Like you don't even know, like you're watching your back like crazy. One thing after the next, and like I tell everybody, the outlaws were serious, and I seen it in their eyes that day when they left us that day. I said, this is going to get crazy. I just couldn't put a level on the craziness. Right. And, then
they're all going to die at this point. I mean, geez.
Right. I got, tombstones hair on my arms that you could right there that you could see, the brothers that were getting killed. And then another one of their guys got shot and one guy got killed in Indiana. Well, now 1997 came along and the government said, no more of this. Janet Reno, who was the U.S. Attorney General at the time,
right?
Janet Reno, she put a full court press on the city of Chicago, on the outlaws and the angels. And 1997 came and they RICO'd about 7, 8, 9 of the outlaws first. They got the first RICO indictment.
Oh my gosh.
All the acts that they did. One guy, the guy for the bombing and stuff like that. So their RICO started before ours. So end of 97, right before I went to prison, middle of 97, I'm lost on the times, but somewhere in the 97s, the outlaws and us sat down and we said, listen, we need to practice the good neighbor policy because we're putting tombstones on our arms. Guys are going to prison for the rest of their life. What are we doing here? Right.
This is giving me goosebumps too.
Yeah. Let's coexist here and just try to do the good neighbor thing. Right. So by the time I went off to prison for the first time, we were at a full blown truce with the outlaws in Chicago and the angels.
Wow.
Which
that's crazy.
Which didn't last long. It was over by the time I came home from prison, but now that was a little bit different story, and it was nothing.
I was going to say, I'm like, that doesn't sound like something that would last very long.
It didn't last long, but nothing compared to what? Nothing.
Right. At least it had to kind of come down a temperament. I mean, it had tempered so high that where do you go from there? I mean, everyone's just setting bombs off everywhere. Like you got to at least go down to the level that you started at.
Yeah, I know. It simmered it all down, and stuff. And, the clubs really, they've been fighting for so long, probably never getting along. I don't know what they're doing these days. I don't keep a tab on any of that life no more. But when I came home from prison the first time, after I went to state prison for 3.5 years, and then the feds, they switched my handcuffs in a Sally port for the state, took me right to a federal prison for 18 months. The feds hit me with something called non-association, meaning I couldn't pick up the phone from a Hell's Angel. Like if I went into a grocery store and there was one there, a bar, I had to leave. If I got caught in any pictures, which with the feds were all over me still, my parole officer would have violated me. And she was very strict about that. She goes, go back to your bodybuilding. She goes, if I catch you around any Hell's Angels, I'm putting you right back in the penitentiary. So
that's scary in and of itself, because you've got basically a target on your back and you have to be in constant like fear of, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's another level of fear.
And now I'm on my own out there because I didn't have the fellas around me.
Right.
But when I came home the first time in the end of 2000, my good friend of mine, my dear friend, owned a bunch of big nightclubs in the shits in Chicago, open till 5 a.m. and stuff.
I have a quick question for you before we talk about your buddy with the nightclubs. Really fast.
Yeah.
When you came back and you had the non-association and you were not, you didn't have any of your buddies to like back you up or whatever, did you have anyone from either Hell's Angels, or probably not, I would assume, but anyone from the Outlaws that was like specifically out to get you that you knew of?
Nothing that I knew of.
Nothing personal. It wasn't a personal. It was a brotherhood.
They didn't like me. I mean, I used to hear the stories all the time. Like, he's down here at these nightclubs, and I'd hear they had no likeness for me, of course, because of what just transpired with us, and they knew I was one of the guys that decided to turn the club into Hell's Angels, right? So I wasn't, they weren't a Mel fan by no means.
No, but they weren't like out to get you. They were hunting you down.
No, and when I came,
no hunting being done.
So I'll back up. So when I went to prison for that first time and I got taken out of that life, and I say, I was so deep in the forest, I couldn't see the trees back in the day. I had so many of my personal friends that wanted to join the club back in the day. And I told them, no, this is not for you. My dear friend, you're going to probably know pro bodybuilder Chuck Sano from Chicago. Right, Chuck, chairman out there. He wanted to come in the club. I said, Chuck, you're getting ready to become a Chicago fireman. Will you put this patch on your back? You're known by everybody. It's not going to happen. And people would say like, well, look at you. And I said, yeah, this is something that I got into young. I'm here. I can't change it. I'm here doing what I'm doing, but this just,
you were 19.
Yeah. I said, this ain't for you guys. You guys see the fun times running around with the patch on the motorcycles, the girls, the red carpet treatment in all the bars, because we're the Hell's Angels. Right. And, but you don't see when we're closing the caskets. And, the bombs and the shootings are going off and our houses are getting raided. You guys ain't living through that, right? So it was then when I went to prison the first time where I reconnected with the Lord. And I said, because like I said, I knew him. I was very deep into my walk with my journey with the Lord. And them years in the club, I never was praying, never was talking to him, And when I went to prison the first time, I said, well, how did I get here? And I wasn't asking the question like, how did I get here? I knew how I got here. I was asking him like, what happened here? I was like the least likely kid to do this, but here I am, and I'm going to trust in you. I don't. And I said, this is what I said to him. And I remember, and this is, in 99 and 2000. And I said, don't let me go home and forget about you and be that hypocrite that used you when I was in the penitentiary, because I'm at my lowest point. I'm at rock bottom, but now I'm going to go home and just run right back into that lifestyle. No room. Please, Lord, if that's what's going to happen, because you know everything, then just stop this right here and let me just, So I fellowship with them. I was studying the Bible at state federal prison. And then I came home in the end of 2000, had that non-association, started getting into my nightclub business and stuff. And, everything I did, I look back and I'm like, I always had that focus for whatever I put my mind into it. I wanted to be 300 pounds. I became 300 pounds. I wanted to, when I got in the Henchmen, I was like, man, I want to this is great. I never knew I wanted to be the president, but I'm like, I just want to give it 100%. So I was doing that with the nightclubs. Now I was still bodybuilding because I loved it, running the nightclubs and, making a great living down at the nightclubs. And I couldn't go around the guys. So that gave me that space, right, where I could enjoy my life. My daughter was, I had my daughter at 17.
Yeah.
So when I went away the first time, she was pretty young. Then I came home, and then now I started having, a good relationship with her now, because I wasn't with my ex that I had my daughter with, but our families were very close. Our mothers and fathers, they stayed close because of my daughter, Danielle. So now I'm home, and I told my daughter, Danielle, and my daughter, Danielle, was now probably 11, 12, 13 years old. And I said to her, I'm done with that lifestyle. I'm not going back to the penitentiary. I'm going to exit the club. I'm going to quit the club as soon as I get off this non-association. You gotta be off all that before you can go in the room and quit the club. I said, but I'm leaving that behind me. I'm going to focus on you, Danielle, and a life for us. I want to be a part of your life, because when I was in the club, I'd see her at my mom's house, or I'd go see her by her grandma's and stuff like that.
You were just focused on what you were doing, though.
On the club, and I thought I was a good dad because financially I was there, because I was making, back then I was making 10, 12, 15,000 bucks a month
that's a lot. Yeah.
Money back then as a young man, so I always was paying my, child support way more than I should. My mother and father took care of my daughter. She had great, grandparents on the other side. So I exited the club early in 2004. I got off my non-association, told the guys, I can't do this no more. I loved you. I have love for all you guys. We all did this together. The skirmish between you guys and the Outlaws is we called it cold. Maybe there was a fight in a bar. That's the everyday biker lifestyle stuff, right? Fighting. Yeah. But the war was over. So when I exited and left, I didn't leave the fellows in no turmoil.
You know what? That's like the thing really fast that really like stands out to me about you, because I think, like you were saying, that there are people who are, older and they want to get into the club because they see the glitz and the glam. But the interesting thing with you is, you came from a good family. You had, a lot of love around you, and it's almost like you were searching for a leadership role of some kind, and you looked up to these guys in the gym, you got into this club, and then you worked your way up the ranks, and then you were so loyal and so dedicated to your brotherhood. And there's something so respectable about that, even though it was in crime. Yeah. It says a lot about you and your character. It was just directed in the wrong way. Like, it just needed to be channeled. And it sounds like once you found God and you were, asking him, why am I here? It's almost like that was your rechanneling moment.
Yeah. And I had told the guys, because I was so close with the guys, some of the fellows came to my mom and dad's house, and my mom being my mom was like 4'4", little old Italian lady. My mom was 40. She had me. So just think how she was 40 back in the day. That was dangerous, right? Wow. Back in the day at 69 when she had me. She loved the fellows. She just didn't like the club part. We'd come over on the motorcycles. You had to eat at my house, an Italian family. My mom's throwing the spread out for all of us.
I'm Italian. I get it.
Yeah, you know how it is. But, she, when we used to leave her house after visiting her and get on our motorcycles with our jackets on, our patch on and stuff, she'd have the rosary beads in her hand, because she knew what comes along with that ride. Right. So, a couple of the fellows went over and were like, man, you need to talk to Mel. He's quitting the club. And my mom said, what do you mean? I can't talk my son out of leaving the club. He's my son. I want my son to be here. I don't want him in prison. And I did, it was so bad when my mom came to see me the first couple of times in prison, I had to tell my dad, you can't bring her no more. I cannot see her sit here and cry with me like this. It's in my heart. Wow. So, we put more stress on the family members than what's on us, because, me going to the state penitentiary and then going to the federal penitentiary afterwards at 27, 28 years old, at 290 pounds and the Hell's Angel leader, I didn't have any issues. Right. I mean, the door's locked every time, I lost my freedom. Right. I didn't have all the freedoms. I didn't have
You're intimidating, very intimidating. You don't have to worry about being taken advantage of.
Worry about anybody on top, getting at me, right? So there was no stress there. It was just the stress of my family, calling home every night to make sure everybody was okay and checking on my mother and father and stuff, So
I have a question about in prison. Did you find yourself, forming like a role where you were protecting other inmates, because of people probably turn to you for protection?
I don't know if it was so-called protection, but definitely I would say the underdogs were kind of coming around me and the guys that I was hanging out with.
I would.
Yeah. When I went to federal prison, there was a bunch of mobster guys from Chicago that I knew from the streets. They were in there. So I bounced around and talked to everybody. I was never a prejudiced dude. Dennis James stood up in my wedding. There's been no prejudice in my body. My mother and father didn't raise me like that. They had black friends, Mexican friends. My parents were really the salt of the earth. So I talked to everybody in prison. I got along with everybody. I wasn't on no page. I wasn't, on anything. So it was okay, but like I said, the freedoms were gone. And, I did not like that. I got to the penitentiary the first time. And, I used to say to all the guys, and we used to have this thing with the tombstones on the arms. And I used to say to the fellows, save me a good spot on your chest. And they'd say, come on, Mel, don't say that. I'm like, well, how are they not going to get me? I'm the poster child for us, right? The president. They want to knock my head off my shoulders, or the fact they're trying to put me in prison for a RICO sentence for the rest of my life. One or the two is going to happen. Well, thank the Lord, it was the prison sentence. But when I got to prison, and I was like, this sucks. Like, it ain't fun. Like, I can't, obviously having my daughter young, I've been a fan of women since I've been a young man. Yeah. So I no girlfriends in there. No, I lost all my freedom. So I was like, this is not cool. This penitentiary thing, which I thought was kind of like, hey, going to the joint, was not cool in my eyes.
No.
Taught me a lesson in there the very first time around. And like I said, that's where I got my deep connection there,
So you got out of prison, you were in there for a few years, and
a total of 4 that first time.
4 years. Okay. You came out and then you met your wife, right?
I didn't meet Melissa until 2008. I went back.
2008. Okay. So you met her after your second sentence.
Yeah.
Because from what I know, you basically had a target on your back for about, 5-6 years. And then the FBI came and they got you. And your daughter was waiting for you. She was waiting for you at a restaurant to eat. And then she found out. So tell me about that. The second time when you had to go back.
So that was 2000 or 2004. I was running the nightclubs since I got home in the end of 2000. Running the nightclubs changed my life. Was not in the Hells Angels no more. Just building my life. Bouncing around from different women. I never could get it right with that because I just was, young man. I'm taking testosterone. I'm, 290 pounds. When the script. Right?
I understand.
Running the biggest nightclubs. I just, they were there for the taking. So that's what I was doing.
You had options.
You had options. So, in the day that they grabbed me, I was dating this girl by the name of Kathy. And I stayed over at her house the night. But the morning, my daughter Danielle, who obviously had to be at least 16 because she was driving, I said, Dee, meet me at our favorite restaurant, the Country House, in the morning. Let's have breakfast before you got to go to school and take your test, And she said, okay, Dad. Well, the ATF kicked Kathy's doors in about 5 o'clock in the morning. And yeah. And I kind of knew it was, I shouldn't say kind of, I knew the RICO was coming because through that whole early year of 2004, they were subpoenaing people to go to a grand jury for me, on me. And the people were telling me, hey, we just got a subpoena. And one crazy thing they did, I always got to tell this story because it just shows you how the ATF is just, it's a funny story.
Tell me.
They subpoenaed every girlfriend that I ever had in the whole time. I mean, any girl that I ever kissed, right? So back in them days, I had 4 main girlfriends. I had a
4 main?
Yeah. I had a girl that I was with for about 7-8 years. I had a girl that I was with for 4 or 5 years. One that I was with for 3-4 years and one that I was with for 2. The reason I went to prison the first time is because when I broke up with the girl that I was with for 2 years, her name's Kendall, we're dear friends. I just told her, I can't give you no more time. You know that I split my time up between all your girls. I run a motorcycle club. I'm all over the place. I can't give you no more time. And she picked the first dude she picked the date after me, was kind of laying his hands on her.
Oh, no.
So I took care of that situation, got caught in the house, and got a 4-year sentence for the battery.
Oh, are you serious?
That's what I went away for. So,
oh my gosh.
She's my dear friend. She's stuck by me through everything. Even though we weren't dating, I'm very good friends with her mother and father. They owned a bar.
That's what it was?
Yeah, that's what I went to the state penitentiary.
That's what it was? Oh my God. Is he Shall I ask? Is he
battery. Yeah,
alive?
later in life in 2012,
Did he make it out of that?
he made it out of it. A little, not too well for the wear. But
sounds like he deserved it.
Later in life in 2012, we ran back into each other. And I had a lifelong restraining order against me on him. I couldn't be around where he was, but he had changed his life around. He was a street dude himself, and he just was doing the wrong thing. Right. And, I was never raised like that, coming from a family with two sisters and a mother. And, if my mother heard me yelling at a woman back in the day, I would have got a frying pan. So, that's what I went away the first time. So I had all these different girlfriends, and then I traveled the state all the time being who I was. So I had a girlfriend in New York. I had a girlfriend in California. I just was, I was a womanizer. I'll just keep it real.
You keep it real.
Yeah, keep it real. I was a womanizer. I loved the women. And, so one morning I get a phone call, and, it's from one of my girlfriends, Joanne, a girl I was with for about, 5-6 years at the time. And she said, "Hey, the feds just left my house." I said, "What'd they want?" And she said, "They gave me a subpoena." I said, "For what?" She said, "I got to go down to Peoria." They said, it's a grand jury about some RICO case on you. And I said, "Okay." I go, "Geez, they're subpoenaing like the girls." 20 minutes later, here I get a call from this girl, Wendy, that I was with from Rockford. I was with this girl, Wendy, for a couple of years, when I go to visit Rockford, 2 hours away. And Wendy had called me, and she said, "Hey, babe." She goes, the feds just left my house." And I go, "What'd they want?" And she goes, "They gave me a subpoena. I got to go on, whatever date it was, to a thing. They got a grand jury about you." And I go, "Okay." And I didn't say nothing. Well, when the third phone call came in from one of my girls, her name is Tanda. It's crazy because I'm still friends with them all.
Tanda? Wow.
And Tanda calls up, and I go, "Hey." She goes, "Hey, babe." And I go, "Hold on. Let me guess. You got a subpoena." She goes, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And I go, "They seem to be going around." So what the feds did was they subpoenaed every girl who knew that I was hanging with at the same time, and they had them all sit in the same room before they put them in the grand jury.
Oh my gosh.
A scorned woman, right? Do you know what I mean? But here was the good thing.
Were you on good terms with any of them?
On good terms with them all at the time.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, you felt like at least
was good. I was good with them all. And here's the good thing. I never mingled them lives.
Right.
Nancy, who I was with the longest, who I was with for 7-8 years at the time before, when I was, getting RICO'd, she probably met 2 or 3 Hell's Angels, and it was all on an accident. I didn't bring them girls into that world.
Right.
I didn't bring them on my motorcycles because I didn't want them getting shot off with me. I didn't.
Right.
So when them girls got in for the subpoenas in the grand jury, and they were asking them questions, and they were like, "Listen," Nancy goes, "I know what Mel has for breakfast." And then Mel goes about his day and does his business. Sometimes he might not come home for 3-4 days. Sometimes he might. She's like, "I have no idea what he does." And that's all what they could all say.
Wow. So you did a good job of keeping them away from that life.
Separated that life from even my friends and family. That was me, right? I'd see the guys out or see my friends out, and we'd be partying in bars and everything like that. But I didn't bring them into that world. So when I had, when me and my attorney, which was my longtime friend, I've been friends with my attorney since me and him been like 17 years old. And he became a big attorney. And when I said, "PJ," I called him later that day, and I go, "Boy, they're giving these subpoenas out like they're Tic Tacs, right?" And he goes, "Well, if they're subpoenaing your girlfriends," he goes, "they got to be at the bottom of the barrel. They got to be digging for stuff here." Right. Little did we know, they already had enough to indict me on the RICO. They just wanted to bring these girls in and do this dog and pony show and just throw the cherry on the top of the cake, right? So we laugh all about it now because I'm still friends with them all. And we were like, they seen each other in the room, and, the 4 of them knew about each other, and, they didn't know who the rest. "Well, who's that girl over there?" "Oh, that's Wendy from Rockford." "Oh, he's got it. Who's that girl?" "Oh, that's who from New York." And they're like, "God, not only did he have us, he had all these other ones." So, it was kind of like the running joke now, but it was crazy.
It's like you can laugh about it now, but I'm guessing it wasn't funny at the time.
So that's when I knew. I said, "Okay, these guys are really hot on getting this RICO indictment against me and whoever else. It takes more than one to get a racketeering indictment. It takes more than one person. It's got to be a few of you. I think it's 2 or 3 to have a conspiracy." And they indicted 4 of us. So 04 came that morning. They kicked Kathy's doors in. early in the morning, got me, hey, Mel, we're charging with RICO. We're bringing you down 2 hours away to Peoria's courthouse. I said, okay. So my mother, Kathy, as soon as I left the house, because they didn't let her make any phone calls, they had to make sure that all four of us, they grabbed 2 of us from Chicago and 2 from Rockford, which was 2 hours away. So once they let Kathy use the phone, she called up my mom and she told my mom what happened. And my mom called up my daughter, who was sitting at the restaurant.
And waiting for you.
Knowing that I told her I'm never going back to prison. So my mom said, you need to get over here, Danielle. They just grabbed your father from Kathy's house and you need to get here. So she went to my mom's house. They were over there. And so once I got settled in, they took me to the courthouse out there. We were in street clothes because they did it so early in the morning. They brought us in front of a judge at like 1 PM. No bond, because the RICO indictment was all violence. So they gave us no bond. You're sitting there, you're going to fight your case from inside this lockup facility for 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is. And I called to the house, my mom got on the phone and was crying. And I said, well, Mom, we kind of knew it was coming. We heard all the rumors. We knew that they were probably going to get it one day, and they got it. I go, and here I am. I said, but we'll get it figured out. And my daughter got on the phone and my mom, they explained to her, like, I said, Dee, this ain't anything I did new. I said, I'm reading my indictment, because now they give you your indictment. I got all this indictment on all this, look like I tell
everything I've done. It's just, they're just telling me now.
I said, this is all from my past, Danielle. And here I am until we get this thing figured out. I said, it's going to be a minute. I said, because I don't know what we're looking at, So that's when the RICO came. And, it was weird because this is what happened to me there. When I made my journey with the Lord and I made that pact with him and said, okay, I thought I was a good guy now because I wasn't shooting dudes off motorcycles. I wasn't selling drugs. I wasn't living that violent lifestyle anymore. But when you surrender to Christ, it's that full surrender. It ain't like, hey, God, I'm going to give you this part of my life, but I'm going to keep this part because I can't lay the women down. So when I came home, I was right back in the nightclub and girl after girl after girl. And my Italian mother, who, was been with my father for 50, how them old people are. She's like, when are you going to settle down? Right. And, I just kept going into that lifestyle. Right. So when I was locked up in them cells now, facing this racketeering indictment, knowing that if things don't go right for me, I'm looking at 24 years at 85%. The feds make you do 85% of your time. My mandatory minimums could, if I went to trial, would have been 24 years. Right. So I'm sitting there and I said to God, I got down on my knees and I said, all right, Lord, not sure exactly what we're doing here again. I said, but here's what I'm doing. From this day forward, I got down. I remember it was cold in this facility they had me in. I was in an 8x10 Wendy by myself, there's no nice prisons, right? And this wasn't a prison. This was a federal holding facility because they don't ship you to prison until after you get sentenced, right? And I didn't plead guilty to like 15 months later because you got to go over all this. You got to have your lawyers get in on this. The RICO indictment, the RICO thing started on us in 1994 and they indicted us in 2004. So think they had 10 years of crime. Minus mine because I went away to prison the first time in 97. So now I didn't have any new predicate acts because I couldn't commit any crimes from prison on the street. So, so when I pled guilty in 2006 to my charges, I was looking back and the last predicate act I had was 1997 when we went and did something against the outlaws. So I'm like, wow. But there's no statute of limitations under RICO. Once they start the investigation, there's no statutes, there's nothing. Anything you did is part of that thing. And if you go to trial, they show a jury, hey, these guys haven't been idiots for 2 years. They've been idiots for 10 years. Look what you know what I mean? When you're not beating a racketeering indictment against the feds when you were active in committing all this stuff. It's not happening. When I was opening up them indictment papers and seeing the charges and the indictments, they had everything correct. You know why they had everything correct? Because guys before us flipped for the government. And they cooperated with the government and were in our indictments about, so it's like everything you did, you had the feds with you because the fellows flipped, So once my lawyer,
that's one thing. Like, I'm not saying that I'm condoning crime, but one thing that always, like, I'm not okay with is, when you have integrity, you have integrity with whatever you do, anyway.
and that's how it happened. And once my lawyers, my dear friend, he had to bring another lawyer on because he's like, Mel, I can't. It would take me years to go through this by myself. He goes, and I have a practice to run. So they got in there, him and PJ and this guy Steven got in there together, going over everything. We sat down with the U.S. attorney and the feds and said, hey, they wanted to show us what they were going to be able to exactly prove against me on and stuff like that. And that's when all four of us, everybody gets their own attorneys. We were all separated. We were in different holding facilities. And we all said, you know what? We're not going to fight this. We're not going to trial. We're going to plead guilty. We pled guilty to our own charges. We hurt nobody else, like I say in every video, because listen, when you leave the club and then something like this happens, there's always people that go, oh, he sat down with the feds. Well, you're right. I sat down with the feds, but I sat down with the feds to plead guilty to my own charges. And not one person in that club or out of that club had to pick up a phone and spend 10 cents to talk to a lawyer because anything me or my 3 co-defendants did. That RICO indictment stopped right there, right? So, but we get a bad rap from some people. Not everybody's fans of ours for what we did. Some people are like, they sat down with the feds. Well, you're right, we sat down, because if we didn't sit down and I said, I'm going to go to trial, you're going to have to give me that time, they would have canoed my head. I was getting 24 years at 85%. I would have just been coming home.
Oh my gosh.
So we did what we needed to do for ourselves without hurting anybody else. So,
So how long were you in there for?
4.5.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
4.5.
Thank God you're here, Mel. Seriously. There's so much more. We're gonna have to do a part 2, okay? Because I feel like we have barely scratched the surface, but I want to bring up the fact that this is what we kind of led with. And this is like the thing that
for
so
sure.
Awesome.
We had to start here because, the road to redemption had to start somewhere, right?
Right.
We say that on all the podcasts. That's why when me and Bernthal did it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And so we'll do a part 2 when you're ready. Because I have to tell the old story. Like I tell people, I have to tell the old story, because where I'm at now in my walk, and look what the Lord did for me, right? When I told him, I'm giving you full surrender. I don't know how long you're going to have me in here, but if you need me to be in here, I'm going to fellowship with somebody. And when I went off to that sentence, I was doing that same thing, Bible studying. We were fellowshipping, and I'm talking with some hard dudes.
Yeah.
There's some hard dudes in these penitentiaries. And they were like, Mel, we want to know. We see you reading the Bible, and we see the way you are to people. We heard the stories about how you were on the street. Something changed you, right? You didn't do it on your own. I go, no. I go, who's going to leave that lifestyle at that young age? I had all the girls. I was making crazy money. It was like sending a kid into Toys R Us and going, hey, son, everything's free. Just go ahead and run, And am I going to leave that lifestyle? No, I stayed there forever until I got killed or, whatever happened. So, that was I call it like this. When I said that was God sitting me down again saying, you said you were going to surrender to me. Yeah, you gave me the bike. You gave up the biker lifestyle, but look what you're doing still. You're still not.
Toys R Us is bankrupt now. So
yeah. We're trying to
can't go back to Toys R Us now.
So, so then when I came home in 2008, that's when I said, okay, Lord, I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm doing this full speed ahead. I'm changing my life. I'm done. I went back to running my friends' nightclubs because I was very good at putting a great security team in these huge clubs with some very, influential people that nobody was going to come in and fight in our clubs, because I had all the main guys that ran the streets in there working for us and stuff. And, I was dating one girl, and then I happened to come out to Florida with a good friend of mine. And that's when I met Melissa.
Aww.
I met her in 2008, somewhere in 2008, I met her.
You two have such an amazing relationship. I love just the love between you two is so apparent.
Yeah, thank you.
And like I said, I mean, there's so much more to your story, but what's really cool is that you and Dwayne Johnson go way back. You're good friends. And because I want to talk to, gosh, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but I want to talk specifically about this. You and him knew each other really well. And then you hooked up with him in 2017 at the Olympia when you were there.
Yeah, he was there.
Tell me about that.
He was there talking about it. $7 was going to do something. Not only were they thinking about buying the Olympia at the time, but they were going to do something to try to bring the Olympia more mainstream. Because as you know, you've been in the sport forever. It's always been a little bit of an underground sport, right? Yeah. And they were going to do it. Well, he was talking to my dear old friend, Jim Mannion. And of course, him and we call him Boss. Him and Boss were talking. And Boss was talking, Jim says, yeah, it's great. Dwayne was there with his family. He says, it's great to have good people around you. He said, he goes, I got my guy, Big Steve, being in Weinberger. And he said, and I got my guy, Mel, over there. And he goes, Mel, he goes, wait a minute. Is that former Hell's Angel Mel? And he goes, yeah. And Dwayne goes, God, I haven't seen him in many, many years. He goes, I didn't know that was him over there. I just seen a big dude. And so then when he was walking by, because, I sit next to Jim right behind the judges, he was down in the row. He had to duck down so the camera, the press guys couldn't see him. And he stopped right next to me and he put his elbow on my knee. And I go, hey, DJ, man, how you been? And he goes, I'm good, man. He goes, I didn't know that was you. He goes, listen, I got to go up on a stage. He goes, come in the back when I'm done. I want to talk to you. And I said, okay. So I listened to his speech out there and everything. So when I went to go in the back, he was completely surrounded. Phil was winning. Everybody was around him to take pictures with him, right? And I seen it and I was like, oh, man, I'm not going to bother this guy. Go sit back down and finish watching the show. Because, I'm always a bodybuilding fan. Right. From every category. I love it all. The women, the men. So I didn't get to see him later that night. He snuck out the back door with his family after he was mobbed and he got out of there.
I would.
Yeah, of course. And it was about a few months later, probably, that A&E had got a hold of me and they were trying to do something with my life and everything like that. I was turning down multiple book deals through all these years. And I'll be truthful about this because I didn't want to go on a book signing tour. I mean, these companies were offering me $100,000 signing bonus, $2 a book. We're going to make it a bestseller, the whole 9 yards. And I go, yeah, but you own me and I'm going to be on a book signing tour. And they go, absolutely. And I go, I just want to be home now. I just want to be home. I had my family.
You're just happy to be home at this point. You would want to enjoy the simple things of life at this point.
I wasn't looking for no limelight. I just wanted to be home and be Mel again, So then after that, me and Dwayne got a hold of each other. I got his number. I threw him a text and I said, hey, bro, I just wanted to get your advice on something. I go, hate to ask you about this because, it's your industry, but I don't know. And I want to get led down the wrong path. So he called me and he said, hey, I didn't know you were interested in telling your life story. And I go, neither did I. I go, but it seems to be kind of popular right now, And he goes, well, let me ask you this. He said, I'll never forget this. It was on a Black Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, almost 5 years ago. And he said, let me ask you this. He goes, how much of the old can you tell? He says, because I knew you back in the day and I see what you're doing now and I see the inspiration that you give to so many people. But how much of the old can you talk about? And I go, everything.
Everything.
No skeletons in the closet. By what I say, ain't put nobody away. There's no bodies. I paid the price for all the stuff that was there. The feds are done with there's nothing, And he goes, that's great. He goes, because to tell where you're at now, we have to tell that A part of it because he goes, it's going to just be so inspiring to people. He goes, as soon as the first of the year comes, I'm getting you in touch with my team at $7. They're going to be on the phone with you constantly. They're going to, you're going to be telling them your story. They're going to be checking out archives and everything like that. And we're going to start from there. And I said, perfect. So that's how it started, and we got a cool dude, a good friend of mine now by the name of Billy Corbin, who wrote Cocaine Cowboys.
Yeah.
Documentary. He wrote 30 for 30. He wrote Screwballs about the steroids in baseball. Square Grouper about the marijuana. So he's a great documentary writer. Dwayne gets him right off the bat. And we're like, okay, Dwayne said, I'm going to put the A-team together for you. And I said, I'm sure you are. Look who you are, right? So puts the A-team together. There's old John, right? We're looking at John.
Tell me about John Bernthal.
Here's where John Bernthal comes into play. We're about a year or so into working on the story for the documentary part. But Dwayne said, after the documentary, I want to do a scripted series, a Sons of Anarchy, a Sopranos, a Mayan, something like that, where somebody plays your character and we use the stories and we do seasons of this. And I said, okay, I like that too. And he said, okay. So we always knew that was in the background, right? So, like I said, a year and a half into us working on the documentary, because, all this stuff takes a long time, right? It takes time to perfect, right? Mm-hmm. He calls me up one day and he says, hey, brother, he said, I just got a great idea. He said, I have the perfect person that can play you in the scripted series. And I said, okay, who's that? And he goes, instead of telling me, he goes, he's an amazing producer. He's an awesome writer. His mind is so sharp. He goes, he could play the old you where you were gritty, and he can play the new part of you, the redemption part of you and stuff like that. He goes, amazing actor. So finally, after like 5 minutes, I was like, okay, DJ, who are ready? And he goes, John Bernthal. And I start laughing. And he goes, all right, what are you laughing about? And I said, well, DJ, I know you're the busiest man, period, in the world. And I probably know you didn't see some social media I put up about 6-8 months ago. I go, but I posted a picture of me and John Bernthal at the Jim Mannion's Pittsburgh Pro. He goes, you did? He goes, you know him? He goes, go figure. And I go, and this is how I know him. My partner that I'm the managing partner for at Core Medical Group, our hormone replacement company, is Sidney Gordon. John is his brother-in-law. And Sid married Kurt Angle's niece, Jackie Angle. John married Jackie's sister, Erin Angle, who are from the Angle family. So I told DJ, not only is he my partner's brother-in-law, but he's your longtime friend, Kurt Angle's brother-in-law too, because he married his niece. And he goes, oh my God, DJ goes, well, obviously this was meant to be, huh? And I go, 100%. And he goes, well, I'll let you call John up and tell John that we want to get him. And then we have to do it respectfully through his agents, Yeah. So as soon as I called John up and he goes, man, bro, I'm in 100%. He goes, I want to do this role. And John just jumped in head first and has been great on it. He's been helping out on the documentary side. And now they're at the point where they're interviewing a bunch of writers to write the scripted side, which is some of the writers are like Taylor Sheridan from Yellowstone. When you have Dwayne Johnson, John Bernthal, $7 Production.
It's going to be amazing.
You could have a story about a hot dog salesman on the corner. You know what I mean? And
this is going to be so good. Oh my gosh. I cannot wait. Yeah. This is like, I feel like I'm going into Toys R Us with this story and just what we have to look forward to. Mel, honestly, I know you did an interview with John Bernthal, and that one was like a 2.5 hour long interview. Yeah. I knew that your story was going to require there's a lot of meat in your story. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of layers. Yeah. And I honestly feel like we're just scratching the surface. So I would like to invite you back.
Yeah, they'd love it.
Let's do a part two.
We have a little finishing up to do. We didn't get into the shows, and there's so much,
I know
my role with our dear friend Jim Mannion, and who's probably watching right now. Because
tell me about that, because I do know. So Jim Mannion is watching. So tell me about your connection with him, and then we'll go and we'll do a part two.
Okay. So I met Jim with Steve Weinberger in 2008 when I came home at Junior Nationals, because they were in Chicago, if you remember. So my dear friend Chuck Sano, who's still our chairman for out there, I wasn't obviously working for the industry. I had met Jim and Steve, knew who they were because I was always a bodybuilding fan. And I met them and I just really got very close with both of them, gentlemen, but me and Jim, we just got close. We stayed on the phone. We stayed in touch with each other, just talking, and at the time I didn't, I was doing the nightclub stuff. I wasn't looking to get into anything else. I never thought about promoting shows. I just never didn't know this industry like that, but me and Jim's just relationship, I'd come to the Tampa Pro because I knew Tim Gardner. I was still living in Chicago. I come to the Olympian stuff and just got to be around Jim and obviously.
He's such a nice guy, very, very tight knit family. East Coast, just a great guy, great energy.
Love him.
Yeah, he's great.
One of my dearest friends, him and Big Steve. I love traveling with them guys. So now, I moved out here in 2014 because this is where Melissa was from originally. And when when I ran into her in 2008 and we talked about us dating, I told her, well, you're going to have to come to Chicago because my dad had passed 8 months after I came home. My dad was very sick when he was a very bad diabetic, and he like held on, and I was home for 8 months from the penitentiary and he passed. So I went and moved back into my childhood home because my mother did not want to be in that home by herself. My sisters had their own houses with families. I was bouncing around, just living where I wanted to. And I said to my mom, I'm coming back home. You don't want to be alone. I don't want you to be. So I was the 40 or 41-year-old dude living in my mom's basement with a career, right? Make sure she was okay, right? So I told little Mel, I told Melissa, I said, you're going to have to, if you want to be with me, you're going to have to come to Chicago. I can't leave my mother. So she packed up her life here, came to Chicago. So we stayed there for 5 years. And then finally one day she looked at me and she goes, can we at least get a Florida house so I can see my mother and father and get out of this cold winters? And I go,
like, she's like, we can afford it.
We can afford it. She had a career. I had a career now.
Yeah.
I said, okay, let's get a getaway Florida house. This is the one we're in. So we bought this in 2014 just to be a snowbird, right? And come down for the winter. And then we bought it in April, and then December, the opportunity for me to buy this big old Gold's Gym, 14,000 square foot Gold's Gym came up that we could buy the gym. We bought the gym. We named it Second Chance Fitness after my mantra, And so we moved out here 2 days after Christmas, December 27th of 2014. We're almost here 10 years. Once we moved here, that's when Jim said to me, hey, Mel, he goes, you're in a good spot out there in Florida. He said, what do you think about throwing your own show? And I said, well, boss, that sounds pretty cool, but I know nothing of the sort. What am I going to do? I don't know none of this. And he goes, you're good friends with Tim Gardner, right? I said, I love Tim. He's my good friend for many years. And he goes, why don't you have him do the production part? You be Mel, get the sponsors, and everybody knows you're around me. You do your thing there, So I said, okay. So I, grabbed Tim up and said, Tim, let's be partners, let's do this. So our April show, that's, next year of April, that'll be 10 years of me and Tim promoting that show together.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. And I know it's been a lot to get through. I mean, the last 5 years have been a struggle for a lot of promoters. So, I mean, hats off to you for keeping it going strong and just keeping yourself so networked and so respected in the industry. It's a lot. It's a lot that you've been able to get through and maintain. It's just incredible.
It's been a great journey, because, with traveling with Jim and working for Jim, we got a funny thing. And me and Jim were just talking about this a little earlier today, because all through the years, people would say, Jim, what does Mel actually do for you? Because, I don't have Big Steve's the head judge. He's been forever. Yeah. There's no title, right? And Jim would say, whatever I need him to do. And we would laugh, right? Jim would say, whatever I need Mel to do, he's there for me, right? So, I help with the chairman. I help with just different promoters.
There's something that you said you would never do. I can't remember what it was. You said you would do anything, but there was one thing, and I can't remember what it was.
I said to Jim, and his wife, I call her Mrs. M. Debbie Mannion is his wife, Deb.
Yeah.
But I call her Mrs. M. And she, she's like not old enough to be my mother, but like that figure to me. Right. She's just an amazing woman. Yeah. And I love her to death. And we'll be, she says to everybody, she goes, when they talk about me and they're like, man, that guy's the politest guy. Hard to believe that was his old life and stuff. And Mrs. M will say, Mel's just happy to be here, right?
To be here. Yeah.
But I told boss, I said, listen, 2 things I can't do. I could never judge because I don't have the attention span to sit at them tables that long. I'd be the worst judge because I'd be like looking at my phone. I'd be looking at the shiny quarter, And I said, I never really want to be a chairman. It's weird because all them years that I spent in the club and everything, I never had to punch a time clock, right? So for me to actually have to punch a time clock these days, which I don't do, would be weird for me, right? So now I'm at all the shows. Wherever Jim goes, I'm at. Me and Steve and Jim. Yeah. Now we have Tyler. We have the team together. I'm everywhere he's at. But I'm on his schedule, we get up in the morning. I have breakfast with Big Steve because he's got to be at the judging table earlier. We do our cardio together, me and Steve. We have breakfast together. They get off to the judging table, him and Sandy and the crew. And then I wait for Jim. Jim takes his time in the morning time, and I'll go grab him from his room, and then we bounce around and we go. The great thing I love about with Jim is we don't sit still long.
Yeah.
Jim is. We'll watch some of the show and he'll say, let's go backstage. Or let's go over here. I have to have a meeting over here. And Jim's great because when he says he has to have a meeting, he's doing it right in the arena.
He's very hands-on. Yes.
Super hands-on. And that's how he's been so successful for 40 plus years, because dealing with, think about it, back in the day, he ran all this on his own. Now it's such a big machine. You got, you got Tyler, you got Steve, you got Robin Chang, you got overseas people, you got Tamer and Tarek. You got a lot of people that are through their hands in me. I deal with the chairman. I deal with whatever Jim needs me to. He
treats everyone like family too, by the way. Like every athlete, when I was invited to go to the NPC first gym, I met him for the first time. And he welcomed me like I was part of the family. I know that's how he treats all the athletes. It's everybody. It's such a family feel you get with the Manions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. And I'm blessed and grateful to be a part of that, to be his dear friend. Funny story, I became dear friends with his brother, John, who's passed away some years back, but he was living out here in Naples, which is only an hour from me. John was in his 80s, and me and him became dear friends, and just salt of the earth guys. And it's that's what congregate there. That's what connects people, right?
Yep.
People that like I said, even when I was in prison, I connected with the guys that kind of were in my realm that you feel, right? And same with me and Jim and me and Steve. We got so tight. Tyler, I watched in this industry since he's been 15, 16, I'm 14 years around now.
Right.
So watched him grow into what he's doing now, and it's just an amazing journey where I'm at with the IFBB and the NPC,
Oh my gosh, Mel, I could talk to you I have so much more that I want to talk to you about, but
how long
unfortunately, well,
16.
Normally I go for an hour or so, but we have had a very loyal group of people watching us live. So I know that this was good. I know that, probably people could sit here and watch us for another hour, but that's why I would like to invite you out for another interview and also bring you back for our Make Your Mark series, which I think this is where we sit down and you tell your whole story in our studio, and definitely want to have you back for that. I want you for everything. So
I'm there with you. Thank you, because you did us a great favor for our shows. You hooked us up with WOLFpak.
Yep.
So now at the show coming up, which is December 21st, the Mel Chancey Holiday Classic, the biggest show in all the states around. Last year we did 565 with crossovers.
Yes.
So just a huge show, a blessing there. Now we have the overall bags for all the overall winners with WOLFpak, and we will be filling them with so many goodies. We got so many amazing sponsors. Little Mel just told me 2 days ago. This is the funny thing. We'll end here. When I grabbed these other two shows, I had partners. Both partners ended up not being able to run the gamut anymore. I would never get rid of it. Me and Tim started together. Tim will be my partner until the good Lord takes Tim home. So Big Steve's the one who told me, Mel, you don't need a partner. You got your wife. She's sharp as anything. She knows it. She will help teach her, right? So they help, teach little Mel everything. But I have a rule in the house. She's not allowed to talk to me about the shows in the house, because she that one where when she first started, she's like, babe, we're 5 weeks out and we only got 55 signed up. I'm like, babe, if you're gonna do that for me every day, I'm gonna go fire you and get a partner with him, right? You can't give me stress, Wen, right? So I told her that. You can't.
That's what women are for. That's what women are for. Hello.
Having Tim as a partner all them years, I told him, Tim, I don't want to know anything. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to get the sponsors. I'm going to be the face and do whatever I do. You do your end and tell me how many people we got the morning I see you, okay, at the show. I don't want to know anything. Don't ask me no questions. You run it the way you would run it normally. So that's how we work. Yeah. So then getting the wife involved, we're here. I'm trying to unwind after a night of, day of craziness, and she's freaking out about the show. So I had to set a rule. So just yesterday, she told me, she said, I got to tell you something. Can I tell you something about the show? I go, don't tell me how many people we got yet. She goes, I'm not telling you that. She goes, do you know we got 19 sponsors? And I
Congratulations.
Said, okay, you can tell me that good news. I
That's
said,
good news. You can know that.
I
All
said,
right. Okay. Mel, I want you to have the final word, but I want you to say a message that you want to, all of your fans and followers and everybody who loves you so much. You get the final word.
All right. Well, from the bottom of my heart, I just have to thank everybody because it is so amazing. And when I travel and I get to see so many people and meet so many new people. Part 2, we're going to have to talk about the John 3:16 devotional team and what I do.
I would love to.
We have to get into that, the boxes of hope and how we feed the children. I travel so much, and now everybody that sees me says, hey, we're part of the team. We watch the devotionals in the morning. I said, okay, you're part of the devotional team, but we're all part of Team Jesus first and foremost, right? And we're just doing this together, right? And I said, I'm a vessel like you are. So it's so amazing that I get to now go to the shows all these years later, and nobody's really going, hey, Mel, we want to talk to you about your motorcycle club days. They remember, but that's a forgotten thing, so to say. Now everybody's talking to me about their faith and the inspiration that I give them. I have these wristbands here on my wrist, and they say John 3:16, and I have hundreds of them. And when I see somebody and I'm traveling or I'm on a plane, which I'm a lot, and they say to me, hey, nice cross. Or, hey, we like your shirt. I go, oh, you're a believer? And they go, yeah. And I take this right off my wrist and put it on theirs. And people will go like this one. They'll go, oh, we can't take that from you. I'm like, I have hundreds. I make these, you can make 350, 400 of these for $300. Really cheap, right? And I have backups right in my WOLFpak backpack that I carry on my back through the travels. And I go right in and put another one on my wrist and I give them away. I can't tell you how many wristbands I've given away in the years. So
if you see Mel, you're getting a free bracelet.
If you're a believer and you tell me you love the Lord, you are getting the bracelet off my wrist, and we're going from there. So I love everybody that I get the fellowship with. I don't call anybody my fan because we become family very fast. We become
I like that
sister. That connection that I get.
I'm like that too.
Yeah. I could tell you are. I've been, I had to go back and watch some of your old interviews and stuff just to see how you were doing. And I seen you had my dear friend Dennis Wolf on there and stuff. And I can tell by the way you get into everything, you shoot from the heart. So I just, everybody, thank you guys. I love everybody. And let's get into part 2 soon, Wen.
Oh yeah. Don't go anywhere. I want to say goodbye to you on the flip side, but to everybody watching, thank you all so much, and stay tuned because we have more Mel coming your way.
Yeah.